Welcome. Good evening to all of those who are joining us from India, and good day to those who are joining us from the rest of the world. I guess you are all in different time zones. This is the very first talk of our new Tech Talk series. This is a new series that the Alumni Affairs Office at IIT Delhi has launched. The intent being to connect all of us to technology. We see rapid advances in the world around us. New ideas emerging, new new technologies being developed, new applications of existing technologies, and quite often we find ourselves at a loss to understand this rapidly changing world. The intent of this series is to connect us to all of these and reignite in ourselves the love for science and technology. Our intent is to bring speakers from our alumni base, which is 55,000 strong and which is a repository of huge expertise. We intend to bring all of these speakers into this series. We'll have not every Saturday, the first Saturday of every month, we'll have a talk, and we've set 8 p.m. As the time. And hopefully we'll, in a few months' time, we will all, remember this and have it penciled in our calendars. I am extremely delighted that Arvind Jain, who is CEO Glean and co-founder Rubrik, kindly agreed to give us this very first talk of this new series. I would now like to hand it over to Amitabh Bagchi, who's my colleague from the CS department, to introduce Arvind and to moderate the rest of the talk. Welcome, Arvind. Amitabh, please.
Thanks, Naveen. It's my great pleasure to be asked to introduce Arvind Jain. Arvind Jain graduated from IIT Delhi with a BTech in computer science in 1996. Spent a year getting a master's in the US, I think, at the University of Washington, if I'm not mistaken, and then went on to have a career where he was somehow involved in some of the epochal technologies of our time, starting from the content distribution network company Akamai, and onwards to Google, where he participated in some of the key projects which have changed the way that people live our daily experience. From there, he went on to Rubrik and now to Glean, moving through some of the key technological transformations and playing a very active and critical role in them. He's going to talk about those roles himself and introduce his journey. So I will just briefly mention that prior to embarking on this journey, Arvind also fulfilled a very important role while he was at IIT Delhi, and that role was that all the computer science students in his hostel were benefited from his tutelage before minors and majors. This was a very important activity that Arvind Jain undertook 3 times a semester, and I can vouch for this, having personally been one of the beneficiaries of the tutelage that I just mentioned. So having said that, Arvind, it's great to have you here. Take it away.
Thanks, Bakshi, and thanks, Naveen, for the kind words. And I mean, I think really good memories from the IIT Delhi days. For those who didn't catch yet, I mean, Amitabh and I are actually were classmates. And Naveen at that time, was our instructor. Used to teach, help teach some of our courses. So it's great to reconnect. Yeah, I mean, thanks everyone for joining the session today. The goal was, for this to be a very informal discussion. Primarily, I wanted to share, my journey as an engineer, and also some stories on how I accidentally became an entrepreneur, during this career, and hopefully, as we talk through this, we're able to shed some light on why it is so so good to actually be an engineer and work on technology. So that's the goal from the talk today. Yeah, so like I said, hoping for this to be a very informal and lively discussion. So please post questions. I think Nilesh and Amitabh are both monitoring those, and we'll go through those Q&A like as we go through the materials. So before we start, we already covered my background. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about is just talk about technology a little bit, like how it has been changing the world, and also at a pace that that's hard for us to imagine. Um, when we were students at IIT Delhi, both me and Bakchi, um, we at that time basically there's no internet for us. There's no notion of like having an internet where you can go and browse, read news, find anything that you need. We didn't have cell phones. Like I'm not even talking about smartphones. Um, we didn't have any way to sort of email people like outside of the campus, and that's the environment that we grew in. And the um, at that time, like if you had to do research, for example, like our model was we would actually go to the central library, try to sort of find the books, in that sort of disorganized mess, try to get the resources when we need to do our research. And this is all was just like this is not multiple generations ago, like this I'm talking about 2 decades back when we were students. At that time, we couldn't have imagined all these technologies that we use today, like as commonplace technologies, like smartphones, connectivity, wherever you go, having a device in your pocket, like watch movies wherever you are, whenever you want. Like these are all things that were really hard for us. Like we couldn't have imagined. Um, that the technology will bring advances at such a fast pace, like in the next 2 decades. And I think the interesting thing is that the same is going to be true for for the coming decades and this century. um, we as people, we will not be able to even comprehend like how our lives are going to change as a result of these um, you know advances that are going to come in technology. um, Partly because it's hard for like for a human brain to fathom exponential change. Like we're all used to sort of seeing things in a linear fashion, but what technology is doing is it's actually advances at an exponential pace. So progress often comes much faster, much sooner than we can actually imagine. There's an interesting quote from Ray Kurzweil, who's an American scientist, and also a predictor. Like he has has a really uncanny ability to predict future trends. So he said that the amount of progress we'll see from the technology in the next 100 years is going to be more than it'll be more like 20,000 years of progress, more than like what we've done like like from the beginning of the human civilization. Like that's how much change we're going to actually see just in the next like another 80 years. um, the reason I wanted to mention this is, I wanted to tell all of you technologists that there are a lot of amazing things that you can do and you will do as engineers and scientists. And all these advances that we are sort of talking about, trying to predict, these are going to be coming from you. So with that, let's review first, some of the catalysts that have resulted in these, amazing advances in the technology. Um, from infrastructure, from a core um, technology perspective, what has changed, that has sort of enabled, these kind of advances, in all the things that we use today. So first at a fundamental level, like, if you think about, core, technologies like, computing or storage or networking, all of them have been, bringing advances at an exponential pace over the last many decades. Most of you have heard by now of the Moore's law. From a computing perspective, machines get faster, get twice as faster, like, every 2 years. And this has been happening, nonstop for like almost 50 years. And that is what has, brought like, such amazing capabilities now, like, at our disposal. Similarly, if you look at storage and storage density, um, we've been able to increase storage density, double it like every 12 to 18 months, again, for the last 50 years. So, to store 1 megabyte of information, you would need like a room full of machinery like a few decades back. And now, of course, you can store terabytes of information in a tiny device, in your phone, and keep it in your pocket. You can have like almost all of the world's written knowledge, stored in your pocket. Similarly, if you think about the internet and networking technologies, internet, bandwidths and connection speeds are going up by 50% every year, for the last 2 decades. And these are the fundamental, advances, in technology that are, of course, enabling us, all of us, to actually create, really interesting technology that we can actually put, to good use, on a daily basis. So, with that, I'll shift gears and talk about some of these advances and how I was actually fortunate to be part of some of these changes as they were happening and contribute to them. So I'll switch gears and talk a little bit now more about what I was able to work on during my career. And by the way, if there are any questions so far, please post it as well. I'll keep waiting for them as I go through this. So the first area of technology that I wanted to talk about is how have videos evolved, in terms of, I think about online videos on the internet. What has been the history like? And I'll also share some of my own personal experiences as as I was part of working on these technologies. In fact, working on something very, which things we sort of feel like not so cool or interesting anymore 2 decades back, but I think they hopefully paved the foundation for what we can do today on with videos on the web. So first, just a little bit of history on that. The first, one of the first videos that was ever streamed on the internet, it was in 1993. It was a very tiny video, 150 by 76 pixels. You can think of that as a very, very small fraction. It will be less than 1 inch of video on your iPhone. This was, this video was streamed live on the internet, with, of course, very poor audio quality in 93, and that actually ended up consuming half of all of the internet bandwidth that we had at that time. So that's sort of very, really where it started. It was very challenging, in those days, because, the bandwidth on the internet was very, very limited, for you to be able to, to stream and share videos online, like the way we're doing today or right now. During the early 2000s, this is when I worked at a company called Akamai, and the goal, for us at Akamai was to help web publishers, stream content or serve, web pages at a decent performance, to their end users. So we would actually build platforms, for we built, one of the first platform to actually share, to allow people to do video on demand as well as live broadcasting on the internet. And so it was interesting days, at that time, again, the internet, you think of, an internet is sort of like a like a road network. There are the arterial roads, like the core, like the core part of the network, and then there are a lot of small roads, which sort of take you to like individual homes. So internet is also a system like that. And so when we were building the service, the goal was again to actually serve videos to people on the web without bringing the web down. Because we have to be really careful about that. The um, as like recent as like 2000s, single large events on the internet could actually bring could actually choke like all the pipes on the internet and cause traffic jams. And so like when we were at Akamai, that is one of the things we worked on. Like how do you let's say your goal is to actually serve a video as a live stream to 10,000 people. So how do you do it in a fashion where you sort of look at this entire um, graph of the internet, look at like all the edges and nodes on this, all of them have some very limited bandwidth available. And then you have to do this mathematical, calculation to figure out like, like what, like, how do you route, these packets, how do you sort of start with like, just one stream, like at the very core, and then start to sort of replicate that. And like, it's sort of like, like traffic planning, that the Delhi police has to do, like to keep sort of traffic in check in the city. Like that's sort of the kind of things that we had to do. You have to think really hard before you would actually do an event on the web. So that's where we were. So we we worked on that. The videos would still be like, it would look like, I guess, one of these like if you look at this WebEx screen, like the videos like in the 2000s were actually like that. You couldn't actually serve like a full screen video on the web at all. It would be like a stamp size video maybe that you would actually try to push. And but when people would use it, that was still amazing to them. None of us could actually, when we were working on it, we couldn't really imagine that that like 20 years later, watching, like the primary way people would watch movies is by actually streaming those movies on the web. Using getting like 4K content easily on your machine, and like having millions and millions of people sort of doing that simultaneously at the same time. Much of it actually, of course, came from not just some of the work that, for example, Google and other companies did on advancing video codecs and like try to actually encode more and more information in fewer and fewer bytes, but also, from the advances in the internet speeds. So yeah, anyway, so that was, one of the fundamental technology that I felt like was fortunate to be part of.
So, Arvind, can I ask you a question at this point? So, earlier you had mentioned the like Naveen has also posted has this question here that things like processor speeds, number of transistors, storage density, and fiber and so on were the key drivers. But like when you talk about codecs and all, it's clear that protocols, algorithms, ideas were also involved in getting this thing moving further, right? What would you say about that?
That is also very true. The Actually, somebody would need to mute. Um, uh, yeah. So the that is absolutely true. Like the fundamental improvements in compute, storage, networking, those are of course the key to enable videos on the internet. But also like like if you think about like going a layer above, that when the initially when TCP and like the HTTP, these protocols were actually invented, the internet was a very, very different beast at that time compared to what it is today. Like, as like I've mentioned on this slide here, that, the bandwidths, were used to be like, 300 bits per second or 1 kilobit per second. Like, speeds used to be very slow. So these communication protocols that were designed at that time, for example, TCP, which is the fundamental, obviously, communication protocol that is used to transmit like, videos or any other thing today. They were designed to be very, very careful. Like when two devices communicate, there's a big focus on these, in these protocols to make sure that when you are communicating, you don't end up hogging, the entire bandwidth, of the internet. And so like the TCP protocol is actually specifically like, very, very rigid, like very sort of conservative. Like the way it starts is that say that, the two parties, that are communicating, and I need to send a video to you. So the way it has to start is that, after we sort of synchronize and start, get ready to communicate, first, I can only send you like, one tiny, packet of information, and then I have to get it back, from you. Then I can actually increase it to 2 packets, and then like 4 packets. And, the idea being, that you're trying to be really, really careful about like what is your impact on the net. And so these protocols were sort of built, in a very conservative fashion like that. And that, those like, as the speeds, sort of increased. So once we were in the 2000s, like we were talking about networks that were 1,000 or like, 10,000 times faster than when, these protocols were built initially, like in the 1960s. Um, it was also clear that we had to advance, these core protocols, like whether it's, communication protocols like TCP or like, video codecs, like, MPEG-4 and whatnot. And yeah, so those were also like equally, like, the contributor for the success of online video on the internet.
Sir, I also have question. Would you mind if I ask it?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, sir. So, sir, my question is regarding big data. So, I have seen some of the photos in which Google have, huge rooms where you store the big data in terabytes, right? So, I wanted to know that do we have some technology on which we are working right now, or any firm on right now working on that technology, which might actually provide us, way to store such big data in small chips, or it gonna be like this, like for next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, I mean and that is the trend that we were, talking about a little while back, that see the density, the amount of information that you can store in a given amount of space, that is actually, you know, um, again, like has seen exponential, pace of growth. So today, you can actually, again, like, said, we have like, these, like tiny device that you can hold on your palm, and it can store like, 50 terabytes or 100 terabytes of information. Same information that the like, 20 years back, you will probably need like a one room full of equipment, to store, right? So that progress is, constantly being made. Um, we can always store more, like we've been able to store more and more information in smaller, form factor, like every year. But there's also the other trend, which is as you make it easy to like have a lot of information be stored in one place, like in a small form factor, the amount of information also keeps going up, right? So like the amount of information that we generate, today, again, that also follows like an exponential pattern. So the last, like, like typically, like, I don't have precise numbers here, but the typically the way it works is that, the information that you created in the last 1 year was probably the same amount of information that exists, for the last 10,000 years. Like, you like that is how significant, the pace of new information creation is. So while, densities will keep going up, um, the you would still like, we would still have like these large, cloud companies, you know, that would be able to actually, offer services in the cloud where you would still go and have to use their services because they will be able to like now once you can actually process, terabyte or a petabyte of information at your home, you would want to be processing like even like, a million times more of that information for which you would need those cloud services. So it's just like, I think, growth happens on both sides. So the other thing, which I'm really passionate about, like, sharing my story on is how, how online maps, got built, over the last few decades. So again, as we started out, mentioning that, in the 90s, when we were graduating, there was no concept of like having, maps data, be available like online. There was no digital map content. If you had to go places like, you either, buy like a map, mapping book, from a store and sort of use that to sort of, navigate, or of course, ask people around. Like that was sort of the way to, get around like in those days. So I'll share some history of online mapping, like how they came about. So of course, maps have been part of of humankind from the very beginning. Like the like exploration has obviously been fundamental to like how how development has happened throughout the world. But digital maps are very new. The first versions of digital maps, which were sort of also being made available online, sort of started to come around in about 1995. And then for that first one decade, the online mapping was actually very restricted. First of all, it was just like, mapping GIS data. There was no imagery, no satellite like, images or street fronts that you could see on the online maps. It was basically just like, you could see roads and you could potentially get some driving directions. And during this time, the um, this data, this was only available for about 10 or so countries in the world. So the United States and then a few companies in Western Europe. Online maps were not commonplace. Most people would not know about them. 2005 is when Google really brought online maps to, to all of us as common people. They really popularized the notion of it. Google Maps was launched, and it became available. Like everybody like who was used to searching on Google now could actually suddenly see that you could also like search for maps, search for businesses, things like that, on Google Maps. It became a lot more popular in 2005. That was also when Google Earth was launched. So suddenly, we all had the ability to actually go and literally see, the landscape of any part of the world, using Google Earth. And this was amazing. Like, just imagine like you're sitting at your home, um, and you can literally just go, fly over Paris or London and just sort of see like, what those, cities look like, from an aerial sort of satellite imagery point of view. So these were like, really amazing advances. But still, the actual mapping data and driving directions, they were limited to those 10 countries in the world at that time. And 2005, is when I actually had the opportunity to uh, come to India and help build Google India. So we started our R&D operations in Bangalore. And in fact, like, when I came, like, the first thing that we had to do was go and build our team. And, we came to IIT Delhi, and, we got, like like had some of the first people, like, who we started the Google India team, were actually hired from IIT Delhi. We went back, and one thing that we noticed was, okay, so once we started to build the team at Google, the question in front of us was, okay, what are we going to do now? Right? I mean, like we built a team. We didn't have any specific agenda. Nobody actually told us, like at Google, like, for example, our CEO or our, at the headquarters, like what you should work on. The goal was to build a team and figure out like how we could actually, solve the problems, for the people in India and elsewhere. And the first thing that, that came to our mind in terms of the project that we would work on is maps. We noticed that, Google Maps, we were used to it. Like, I actually spent a few years in the US. I was, very much, used to using Google Maps, and that was my primary way to sort of go from one place to other. And when I came to Bangalore, we noticed that we didn't have any maps, for India. In fact, nobody had any, any mapping data. In India. So like for again, like we were still living in that world where to get by, to get around places, you had to just use the offline world technologies. um, and so we decided to go and build maps for India. And as we researched that, um, it turned out that it's a very hard problem, because to actually map like all the roads, um, all the intersections, like all the stoplights, like it's a fairly complicated exercise, and it requires you to be actually traveling the entire country, like with like advanced like mapping equipment on your cars, and sort of do that mapping. It felt very daunting. Daunting. It felt like it would take billions of dollars of investment to actually make that happen, and which we didn't have. And the so like we just again, and we actually tried to see if agencies, do government agencies have like this data available, because of course like ultimately the city planning departments should have information like these. But we're not successful. Like in general, we felt that a lot of like we discovered that 80% of the roads in India don't even have names. Like many of them have no official record, like in the planning books. So we basically followed a different approach. We said that you already have the ability to actually fly over India through the Google Earth product. Like that was already available even for India. Like you could, because satellite imagery, of course, is easy to bring that, make that available for the whole world. So the so you could actually fly. You could actually see, for example, the ring road, the outer ring road. You could see the IIT campus. All of those things were visible. It was just that it was not labeled. Um, so we decided to actually build maps, for India in a very different fashion. Sort of like follow a Wikipedia like approach, where give people tools to draw on that satellite imagery. And that is how maps originally got built for India. We built a tool called MapMaker. This was our first project that we worked on in Google in Bangalore. And it's basically what the name suggests. You can actually go on Google Maps and go in edit mode and start sort of browsing over satellite imagery, start to draw roads, start to sort of mark, points of interest, like, temples or, businesses. And it was amazing, like, when we launched this tool, we made it available. Uh, uh, Again, like, it completely surpassed like our expectations of what it would actually, like how good this tool would be, first of all, because, like we always feared that people would add like, incorrect information. They will like, be mischievous and do random things on the platform. But I think the power of people like always like comes, creates high quality content, just like how Wikipedia, like has achieved that. We were able to achieve the same result with MapMaker. And within like few years, like, we were able to actually go from the 10 countries in the world having online maps to every country in the world having online maps. Like almost all of it through user contributions, where people actually drew those maps for us. So that was a like an amazing experience. And again, the as a engineer, like it's it's that's like that's the best thing that happens to you. Like, there is so much work that needs to get done on technology, and like you get lucky, you get to work on some of them, and then you can see the impact of your work all around you. Um, the so yeah, so that's a little bit of history on um, on online maps. Of course, these days, like things have advanced, well beyond that. Now, in fact, you can not just see aerial, imagery of the world. You can actually today decide that, oh, like, like I feel like, I want to spend a day, in Amsterdam and just go on, the Google Street View and sort of like just drive through, like, experience like every shop, every street, every park, like, that's sort of like how amazing, mapping has become. And I really, really help, sort of like creating these, awesome experiences for all of us. Yeah, so so anyway, so that's sort of, yeah, there was some experiences from like working on maps, which was sort of really meaningful for us. With that, I'll switch gears and share a little bit of my journey, like how like I got to become an entrepreneur. So like my as I was working through my career, like I was 100% a technologist as an engineer, like working on these some of these technologies that I just talked about. So like, what ultimately led me to actually also follow, become an entrepreneur. So like just a little bit of background on that. So I want to share the origins of that, like, how I got to start Rubrik, with my colleagues. So the like the cloud. So by the way, public cloud um, is a relatively new concept. So AWS actually started in 2006. Before that, like Google was doing a lot of fundamental work on large scale computing, which was sort of necessary for Google to be able to build this search index over all of the content on the internet. So they were like, really amazing, distributed systems, work that happened at Google. And Google actually published, quite a few of that, fundamental work in the academia, in the research community, which sort of spurred like a lot of, amazing open source development in large scale data processing infrastructure. AWS launched in 2006, as the first public cloud, and offered storage and compute services at that time. And then, like, over the next um, um, like decade or so, cloud sort of became mainstream, like the way for the future. Every company that was storing that had, like, of course, like all companies have been storing more and more information, for their business needs. And it sort of became clear to businesses that they had to actually adopt this new technology, the like public cloud technologies to help, store and protect and manage all of their data. So this was a big trend, like it was one of the biggest shifts in computing that we've witnessed like in the last few decades. Like it completely changes, public cloud has completely changed how businesses use technology, where they store data, how they manage it. And we were in the middle of it. Like I worked on infrastructure at Google, and I was seeing this transition happening firsthand, where every like every day, every year, we would actually see many companies come to Google, and asking us for like how they, we could help them, manage their data strategy. And this one problem was becoming very clear. There was not enough, um, it was not easy for companies to manage the amount of information they had to store, it was also very hard for them to keep it safe, especially as they wanted to transition all of that information that they had from legacy systems in their data centers back into the cloud. Um, and so it was an interesting, place for again for me as an engineer to be at. We saw this opportunity. We felt like while Google was building great infrastructure, you know, that businesses can use to store information, they were still, expecting their clients to do a lot of work um, to actually embrace those cloud technologies. And we saw an opportunity, like as an engineer, we saw that we could actually build some products in this space to help, like, management tools to actually really make it easy for businesses to sort of maintain this hybrid environment where there's some information in the data centers, some in the cloud, and sort of help them, migrate into the cloud over the future. And that is, what led to us starting this company, Rubric, in 2014. We had, this was my first entrepreneurship experience. So the so like a lot of interesting lessons and journeys. If you have questions, please post, and I would love to sort of share my journey there. But like otherwise I'll keep going. One of the things, that we were lucky, like I think we found the right problem and we were able to really build a strong business with it. But with that, like, also came like a lot of learnings, on how do you actually build a successful company. Um, One of the things that happened was the demand for our product was so large that we had to grow very fast. And we had to learn, like, how do you scale a company? How do you, um, how do you hire? How do you, you know, convince people that, you're working on a mission which is meaningful, and, working on technologies which will help people learn. So there was like, a lot of great learnings, along the way. But one of the things that happened was that we grew very fast as a company. Within 3 or 4 years, we were more than 1,000 people. And that brought its own set of challenges, to us. And I'll talk about some of them. One of the things that happened was, while public cloud was getting like more and more mainstream, there's another big trend in the industry, which was actually not able to. So one of the other big changes that were happening during this time was what is called the Sas Transformation Phenomena. How businesses use technology, how they buy business applications, that also completely changed over the last 1 decade. The like instead of like buying software and installing those applications in your data center and then use them to meet your business needs, the model in the industry sort of shifted to cloud hosted applications. And the like as businesses, so for example, when we built Rubrik as a company, we didn't build any data center, like we didn't have any physical sort of servers that we bought to basically run business applications for our own company. Everything, like in our technology environment was basically was a SaaS application. So our IT infrastructure was completely like outsourced, like in the sense that we use like the Google tools, we use like other such applications. Everything that is managed in the third party. So anyway, so that is one other big trend that was happening in the last few years. These days, of course, like any modern company, they don't even think about like, buying machines or servers or building infrastructure themselves. Like it's all hosted in the cloud. So as we grew rapidly at Rubrik, one of the things that we realized was that, growing a company is a very challenging thing. We were 1,000 people in 4 years, and we had all like, our IT infrastructure was, like I said, it was all 100% based in the SaaS cloud. All of our company knowledge was sort of, in these different cloud applications, right? And one thing that became very hard, in this new, model of technology was that it became very, very hard for people to find information, that they need to do their job. We struggled a lot, like, as we grew, we found that people were struggling to find information, also get help. Like they couldn't actually figure out who to, go and get help from. And anyway, so these were some of the problems we were facing. And that actually ultimately also motivated me to actually, start Glean as my next company to solve exactly that problem. Like, when you have information in your company, so distributed and so fragmented across like hundreds of different applications, when all of you sort of work, remotely, like, from your home, then help is not like so easily available. It becomes very hard for people to actually, stay productive and do more. And so we saw that struggle firsthand at Rubrik. Like in our annual surveys, we would see people complain about that problem the loudest, that I cannot find anything in this company, and I don't know who to go and ask for help when I need help. And so anyway, so that sort of led to like, another entrepreneurial journey for me. Like we started this company, Glean, which is sort of, think of it as the Google, but for your workplace, for your but for your workplace, for your and that's what I'm working on right now. And the so yeah, so that I would stop right there and see, like, I see there's some questions that were coming up here. The but again, like it's a it's like really great to be able to share my journey, and like would love to now sort of address the questions that have come. And
Thanks, Arvind. That was really very interesting. Let me put to you some of the questions that are coming in. My colleague and our junior from IIT Delhi, Saurav Bansal, has some curiosity because even I recall there was a project called Map My India at the time, which was overtaken by Google Maps. When how was that product, and how did you compare it with yours?
So I'm actually, so we did see the Map My India product during those days in 2005. And that product was actually built with the traditional sort of design, where you would actually go and look at paper maps, or like, go to like, the planning agencies and sort of get, the cartographic data from that. And then sort of, go and map that data yourself, like, build it in your own system and then make it available to people. And that was just not simply a scalable approach, and not a feasible approach, in India, because a lot of the information that you would get from that, like if you look at a paper map, is going to actually contain less than 10% of like, the actual like, information that you need. Like, most of the roads, like even in Delhi, for example, like most of the roads are unnamed. So you can imagine, like in the other cities in the country, like, the problem is even more acute. So we saw that approach, and we felt that was unfeasible, and that's why we went and said, we can actually use people, the power of people, like, you sitting in your neighborhood, more than anybody else, like, and so like giving that, power to people to create that data sort of helped us, create much more detailed maps.
So another question here from Jay. Sorry, Saurav, I'm moving along. There are a few questions, if you don't mind. Yeah. So there's a question from Jay regarding, I think this is a curiosity people have in successful companies. One is that how did you meet your co-collaborators, your co-founders? and how did you develop the solution? And of course, the aspect of leaving a big successful company where you had a salaried job to and the risk of starting something new on your own. How did you deal with that?
That's a great question. The I think like the first thing which I always like to remind people is, if you have studied at IIT Delhi and you're graduating from there, then you should not be worrying about the risk of having a job in your career. Like you've done the hard work already, and like you should like you should be confident, like you should think big and not worry about like having a job, because that is something that you'll always have. I mean, there are very few of you like who have been able to, like, who can claim to have studied from this one of the best institutions in the world. So that's the first thing that I always tell people, that take risks, be bold. There is nothing to fear. I mean, technology, like we this the today, like we talked about, like how technology is really changing the world, and it's having a larger and larger impact on every sector of the industry. So there are more opportunities than there will be people to sort of be able to meet, like to work on. So that's the first thing. When if you have an idea, you should not think about like your cushy job or any of that, because you can get that cushy job again. Like there is that's not like if you have an idea, you're passionate about something, just go and work on it. And you will also find especially with IIT Delhi, there's a great network of people who would actually like to help you in those journeys. Like, we have a great, alumni network. A lot of people who would actually, for example, fund your effort, invest in your company. So yeah, so that's number one. Like, that's that, and that's the thought process that I also had, which was, if there is, if I wanted to work on something, I never felt that, like I was taking a big chance or a risk by trying that out, because I could always go back and do my job. Like I'd done hard work, and I proven myself to be a dedicated worker. So like I never had that fear that I won't have a job or won't be able to provide for my family. So anyways, that's number one. The other question here was, how do you actually start? How do you find your say, like the partners, like who you're going to be starting, for example, a company with. So the first thing is, like I actually, like my transition into entrepreneurship was actually accidental. It was not that I was actually planning to be an entrepreneur, and now I'm actually sort of working backwards and first trying to figure out, okay, what is this thing that I should be working on? Like, come up with an idea, and then come up with you know the right set of team to work with. Like, for me, it was more accidental, and I believe it's actually accidental for most of the companies. Normally what happens is that a problem comes to you. There is you like you are doing some work as part of, like your job, your work life, or your you sort of you run into problems that need to actually get solved, and you run into them all the time. And that's exactly what happened with us. For example, I was telling you about the story of Glean, where why did we start Glean? Because we saw in our previous company in Rubrik, a really big problem, um, which was which people were struggling with. People were struggling with like how to be more productive, and um, and like the problem that they mentioned to us, like in our surveys, was they couldn't find things in the company. They couldn't find the right information that they needed to do their job. So when we see that problem, then we try to actually go and find a solution for it. We looked at the market. We saw that there was nobody else who was trying to solve this problem or had a good product in it. So then we decided to build one ourselves. So that's sort of one thing which happens often, is that the problems will come to you, like in the context of your own life, in the context of your own jobs. And when they come, then you sort of decide to start to work on it. And the like in terms of who you work with, like the for me, the idea was to actually sort of go and work with people who I knew, who actually brought like, complementary skill sets, to me, so that like as a team, we could actually be a more powerful team, to achieve our vision. So for example, when we started Rubrik, my value in the company was to bring the technology development expertise, and then we had another person like, who was more of a business person, like who could actually bring the business expertise. So that's what we did there. Um, yeah. Anyway, I don't know if that answers the question.
Arvind, actually, you answered three questions here. I want to just make a couple of comments on these because these are very important points. So, first point that you made, which I think has to be reiterated, because our students somehow feel that getting a job is something difficult for them, and they spend a lot of their time while at IIT focusing on job interviews rather than on the learning which might help them later. So I think one thing that you are communicating, which is worth communicating, is that the jobs are there. We have to, our students can aim higher, aim to learn, aim to go deeper, aim to take risks, because the safety net is available since they are from IIT Delhi. So this is one very important point you made. The second very important point that you made, I just want to rephrase and reiterate it for our students, is that you don't become an entrepreneur first. You don't say, I want to start a company. You go deep into technology, you spend time, you brush up against the real world by actually trying to build things and push the technology that is currently there. And in that process, you get good insights into what is needed, plus some of the tools on which you can build to create the solution for the next problem. So this is a very important message, I think, for the students, that going deep, understanding, spending time is the only way to find your way into entrepreneurship. It's not that entrepreneurship happens first. So thanks for these two. And about team building, there was a question here also. You mentioned about how to meet founders, how you met founders, complementary skills, and people you knew and trusted. So a question from Ashutosh here is that as you scaled, you found the team building was a major challenge. You went from a few people to 1,000 in 2 to 3 years. So how did you deal with those challenges, particularly in a technology setting where you need tech people, you need business people, all kinds of people? How did you deal with those challenges, or what do you have any insights from that?
Yeah, so like I'll share the story from Rubrik again. So we started out, and it was a few of us, like, in the initial founding team, and we thought that, we had the best idea in the world, to be able to go and recruit and, like, just like build like an amazing team. I felt that I was good at, motivating engineers myself, because I was at Google before, and I had actually, managed to convince, so I thought I managed to convince like hundreds of people to join, our teams at Google, and they were really, really good. So when we started out, like, at Rubrik, we followed the same process of recruiting. Like, I would go and talk to people, like, I would search for, again, like, the idea was simple. Like, we would look for, again, like, graduates from top schools, and try to connect with them, and hire them. But for the first 2 months or 3 months, we managed to convince nobody. We had zero success in actually convincing anyone to actually work work at our company at Rubrik. And that was like, like a big realization for me, that, like, all that while before, like, it was not me, like, who had the skill to hire. It was like, the brand of our company at Google that was actually doing all the hiring. And so I had to learn that, like, it's always like, you have to put in a lot of work. Building the team is actually the hardest part of building a company, and you have to be, very, you have to be very thoughtful about, about that. And it's actually, um, is also a very important exercise. When you initially build your team, you have to make sure that you're getting the best people, like the people who are all better than you. to be that core foundation of the company. And so we spent a lot of time learning how to understanding from people what was preventing them from actually joining us, what improve articulate your story well, show people the right opportunity, what opportunities in front of them. As a startup, joining earlier stage startup is actually a very appealing thing for engineers to do because they learn a lot. So focus on the message of how people will learn a lot. So those are some of the things that we would do to convince and build that team. But once you get that, once you get past say you hired 10 really good people, then that exponential motion kicks in, where because now you have these really good people who have joined your company, and when the 11th person is coming in, they feel a lot more comfortable. When they see that so many other good people have done it, there must be something good here, right? So it's sort of then it starts to feed itself.
It
So we
starts to
found
spiral,
the second
right?
phase to be easier. Yeah.
Okay, so there are only two questions. We can take only two questions.
Yeah.
The last one has been queued up earlier. I'll ask it to you in the end. But first, I want to call upon Professor Nalin Pant from chemistry to ask his question. Naveen, could you unmute Professor Pant?
Thanks. Audible, Mr.
Yeah,
Jain?
yeah. Yes,
Yes.
Nalin, please go ahead.
Yeah. Can I call you Arvind?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, fascinating. You ticked all the boxes, but I am just concerned, not relevant to what your business model was, but just the ethics of business, particularly in light of the Senate hearings that are happening with Facebook right now, and how much of your business plans are, so as technologists, we have much greater power. We have a greater understanding of technology. How much of that can be used for betterment based on our understanding? And how much of the vulnerabilities of the rest of the world are we exploiting? Does that thought
Yeah.
process come into your business plan? But thank you so much. I really enjoyed listening to you.
Yeah. That's a great point, Professor Pant, and very relevant, of course, with companies like Facebook, especially companies that cater to directly to consumers like us. I think for us at least at the at Glean and at Rubrik before, these we built these are enterprise businesses in the sense that we are selling our product to a business. And from that point of view, that particular concerns or doesn't come into play for us, because ultimately our product is actually is used in the business context for people. And we so yeah, so not very directly applicable to us, but it's a very important point. I think when as people start to when some of you start to think about businesses, I think the success at all at any cost and exploiting the vulnerability of your consumers, that can maybe bring some short-term success to you, but it's not the right long-term thing which either will make your company successful or make you feel good at the end of the day. I think the final reward for all of us is how do we ourselves feel about what we have done, what we've contributed. So yeah, so great point. Thanks for bringing it up.
Okay, thanks. So, Arvind, last question. You've talked a lot about the past, but two of our listeners, Jay and Srimanti, want to know what's in the future. What are the technologies going exponential in the next 20 years? Tell us now so that our students can train themselves and get jobs in precisely that area.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't think we have to really pick any specifics. You can take any area and you can see fascinating, development and advances in it. Whether it's even, really, really old school, technologies or areas like, shipping or like, and trucking, like, you can see like technology is having a big impact everywhere. Like especially like, personally, like for me, like, what are exciting areas? I think health tech is actually like how you bring technology, into like, better health. That's actually like one of the fastest, like growing, opportunities. But it's everywhere. I mean, I think um, like I said, like I think technology is fundamentally changing like all the industries today.
Great. Okay. Thanks a lot, Arvind. Thanks for all the stuff that you have shared with us today. I personally had forgotten how much fun it was to get fundas from you, since it's been more than 25 years since we studied for the last exam together. And when I say when you studied and you told me what to write in the exam together. So thanks a lot. I think it was very illuminating, very interesting, a lot of different aspects. And I think the key message here is that there's a lot to do. There's a lot of interesting things going on. And if our students plan to engage with those things, there are many opportunities ahead. So thanks for giving this message and for talking to us. I'll hand over to Naveen to say a final word, and we can close this session then.
Thank you, Amitabh, and great many thanks to Arvind. I think this was really wonderful. I realized after we had sent you the invite that we've put a lot on your plate. Asking you to give a talk which could tell our students how interesting it is, or how challenging it is to remain connected to technology, and the wonderful opportunities that exist there. But you are the right person to have taken this, and this was a beautiful talk. I think I learned so much from it, and I'm sure so did our students. And all other alums who are joining. So this talk is not just meant for our students, but also our alums in different spheres of life, in different areas, who would like to just understand, right, what is happening in the world around them. Someone says cloud. That reminds me of an interesting anecdote. Someone was telling me that they went to the secretary in a certain department. The secretary posed the question, what happens to the cloud when it starts raining? And of course, this cloud was the the internet cloud, the public cloud, as we know. So yeah, I think these talks will help us connect and answer those questions, right, the next time we hear them. So
Yeah.
Terrific. Thank you so much. I think this was really wonderful. I'm sure everyone here enjoyed it. Thank you for waking up early in the morning for this talk, and have a wonderful day. And also to rest of the audience, have, wherever you are, a good day to all of you. Thank you.
Yep. And thank you, everyone. Thanks, Naveen. Thanks, Amitabh. And yeah, it's an honor to be able to, talk to like, all of you and share my experiences. So thanks for giving me that opportunity.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.